The time we live in is undoubtedly an interesting one. Perhaps at no other point in history have technology, medical science, and social conventions evolved so quickly over such a short period of time. Sometimes it seems that technology released last week has already been superseded. Medical advice changes so often that it's impossible to keep up to date, and perfectly acceptable names and phrases have become deeply offensive without us noticing. With all this change happening all the time, it is perhaps little wonder that many of us still hold on to comforting fragments of the past, even if those fragments are counterproductive, technologically inferior, or just really bad for us. So sit back and enjoy some of the outdated things that you probably still do. It wasn't all that long ago, relatively speaking, that the only way to communicate with somebody on the other side of the world, or indeed more than a few miles away, was to write them a letter and then send that letter through the postal service. Then in 1971, Ray Tomlinson sent the first electronic mail, and things began to change. Slowly at first, but by the mid-1990s, business email had become an actual usable alternative to snail mail, and the rest of the world soon followed. Of course, nowadays email is starting to fall by the wayside in favor of instant messaging, and it's easy to see why. If, for example, you wanted to send a letter from London to your granny in Australia, even with expensive express mail, it's going to take about 4 days. Given that you could now send not only that letter, but a huge album of your latest photographs in just a few seconds, writing a letter by hand and posting it seems absurd. Yet millions of people around the world still do this. As to why this might be, apart from obvious answers such as granny refusing to learn how to use a computer, a surprisingly large number of individuals appear to find this admittedly somewhat archaic ritual to be almost cathartic. Deliberately setting aside time to take longer to do something than necessary is the only way that some people have found to take a break from the stresses of modern life. This, coupled with the fact that several studies have shown writing things out by hand rather than typing them may actually improve the overall quality of your work, could just mean that it may not be the best idea to stop writing letters entirely. Plastics are everywhere. Disposable nappies, drinking straws, single-use plastic bags, the list goes on and on. In 1965, when the one-piece polyethylene shopping bag was patented by the Swedish company Cellaplast, people thought they were absolutely incredible, and they caught on in a big way, as you well know. Although the world is slowly being forced to acknowledge just how much of an environmental disaster these and all other single-use plastic items are, the majority of us still use at least some of them, simply because they are so convenient. This is one of the few technological advancements that actually has no genuine benefit apart from facilitating laziness. According to Google, 190.5 million tons of single-use plastics are thrown away every year. And there really is no need for this anymore. Even if we assume that the vast majority of people are not prepared to go back to using washable nappies, carrying around their own metal straws, or remembering to remove their reusable bags from their car every time they go shopping, we now have perfectly acceptable alternatives due to advances in bamboo and other plant-based materials. However, because about 50% of the human race is, for some reason, instinctively wired to rail against any sort of change, it's highly unlikely that these alternatives will be universally adopted unless governments around the world ban single-use plastic altogether. In the UK, at least, the banning of these types of bags, combined with the introduction of minimum charge for reusable shopping bags, has produced some interesting results. According to the government website, and we are always inclined to take a pinch of salt when it comes to research carried out on policies by those who instigated said policies, plastic bag use across all major supermarkets has fallen by more than 98%. Sadly, as long as single-use plastics are still on the market, and perhaps more importantly, are cheaper than more environmentally friendly options, people will continue to use them every day. With the plethora of available instant messaging programs that allow you to send messages for free over your cellular data or Wi-Fi connection, you could be forgiven for thinking that standard SMS or short message service communication is a thing of the past. Sadly, not only is that not the case, but if you are unfortunate enough to be in a position where you do not have an all-inclusive bundle attached to your contract, some pay-as-you-go tariffs still do not provide this, the amount that you pay to use this outdated service is genuinely scandalous. The price of a single text message in the UK varies between 3 and 12 pence. If we take 5 pence as the average, then in order to send a gigabyte of data via text message, it would cost £357,142.85. Now, obviously, no one would actually do this, but in terms of our cost of data per gigabyte, it is the most expensive form of communication in the world. So why do people still allow themselves to be absolutely ripped off like this? Well, like most things, it boils down to convenience and lack of technology. technical know-how. It's safe to say that the majority of people who pay for individual text messages probably don't send all that many. So in the grand scheme of things, it's not actually costing them that much money. Furthermore, if you're only sending, say, 20 text messages a month, then you may not consider it worth it to download an app like WhatsApp and learn how it works. The process of sending a text message has been the same for decades, and especially for the elderly, getting to grips with a new platform may be more hassle than it's worth. If you were born before the year 2000, then there is a good chance you will have experienced the following scenario. You're several books into your favorite series, you've waited almost a year for the next installment to be released, and tomorrow is the day. You set an alarm, you get up at 4 a.m, you make your way to your favorite bookshop, you stand in line with the other superfans, hoping to get your hands on a copy. Unfortunately, you're not the only person to think of this, and several hundred individuals got there the night before. By the time you get to the front of the line, every single copy has been sold, meaning you will now have to rush frantically to every other bookshop in town, hoping against hope that you're going to be one of the lucky ones. Of course, this scenario does not just relate to books. Exactly the same thing has been known to happen with video games, album releases of popular bands, and even children's toys. Nowadays, thanks to everybody's favorite high street slayer, this scenario is entirely unnecessary, as is, some people argue, the purchasing of any physical media at any point. All you need to do is place a digital pre-order, and as soon as the time arrives, your book, album, or movie will be available on your device of choice. Strangely, not only do some people still purchase physical copies, but they will also wait in line to do so. Recently, the release of Kevin Kwan's latest book, Lies and Weddings, saw hundreds of people queuing outside bookshops across America just to get their hands on the first physical copies. So, why do people still do this? Well, one bookshop owner in Brighton in the UK was kind enough to speak to us has a theory. According to this lady, for those hardcore fans of traditional forms of media, being one of the first people to get an actual physical copy of a book is often as much about feeling like they were part of the release as being the first person to read the latest story. As to why many people still prefer a paper copy over a digital one, she had this to say: "Digital books are great. I have a Kindle, and I use it a lot. For some people, though, reading a book by your favorite author, is about more than consuming the content as quickly as possible while on the bus or during your lunch break. There are those out there, myself included, who use reading as relaxation therapy, and for that, you need a proper book." So there you have it. Outdated they may be, but physical books are not going anywhere. If you think about it, the continuing consumption of tobacco by humans is truly baffling. According to the website cancercouncil.com, although smoking wasn't directly linked to things like lung cancer until the 1950s, people have known it was pretty bad for you for quite a while now. Quoting that website, in 1602, an anonymous English author published an essay titled Work of Chimney Sweepers, which stated that illnesses often seen in chimney sweeps were caused by soot, and tobacco may have similar effects. The problem, of course, is nicotine. Anti-smoking campaigns claim that it can take as little as one cigarette to cause a nicotine addiction, and once you're hooked, kicking the habit can be as difficult as getting off heroin or cocaine. But why do people start in the first place? I mean, sure, nicotine causes a dopamine release, but it's nowhere near as intense as the other drugs we mentioned. And the answer seems to be largely down to a combination of availability, peer pressure, and the portrayal of smoking within movies, TV shows, etc. Up until very recently, the majority of cool people in the movies were smokers. While cocaine has also enjoyed this media glorification to some degree, the look of nonchalant suavity that smoking seems to give a character is far easier to attempt to emulate than taking cocaine. Not least because in most countries you can buy cigarettes over the counter. As to why you can still do this, various powers that be usually claim that this is down to people being allowed freedom of choice. However, there is another theory often put forward by, shall we say, the more skeptical among us: the colossal amount of tax revenue that cigarettes bring in. Taking the UK as an example, in the financial year of 2003 to 2004, the UK Treasury netted about £8.8 billion from tobacco tax. Even if we take into account the extra £2.4 billion a year that smoking-related illnesses cost the NHS, completely banning smoking would still result in a not insignificant loss for the government. Although we often hear about plans to stop people smoking in sound bites across various news outlets, no one seems to be trying particularly hard to stop it. With tobacco companies now concentrating their advertising on less developed countries where the dangers are less widely acknowledged, it looks like it may be around for quite a bit longer. According to legends, the first person to use some sort of automated system to wake himself up was Plato. However, it was not until 1847 that Antoine Radier filed a patent for the first adjustable mechanical alarm clock, making this technology widely available to everyone. Since then, of course, the standard clockwork device with 2 bells and a hammer has been adapted beyond all recognition. Nowadays, a quick search online will provide you with such ingenious devices as an alarm clock drone hybrid which at the specified time will not only make an annoying noise but also fly around the room, forcing you to get out of bed and deal with it. Although the dedicated alarm clock has suffered a serious decline in popularity over the years, mostly due to the fact that we all have phones with inbuilt alarms, they are, believe it or not, actually making something of a comeback. But why is this? More and more people are coming to the conclusion that it is not, in fact, a fabulous idea to spend 20 hours a day staring at the screen of their phone. We've all been there. You promise yourself you will get an early night, you go to bed at 9:30, and after giving yourself about 5 minutes to fall asleep and failing, you reach for your phone and watch YouTube videos until 2 a.m. Hello there, 2 a.m. watchers. This, according to experts, is bad for you. Stop watching now, or don't. I like your watch time. In order to remove the temptation, many of us have started instigating a no phones in the bedroom policy. Because of this, new, or in fact old methods of waking up in the morning must be found, and alarm clocks are being purchased or fished out of the back of cupboards all around the world.